True blue, through and through. A real story of unshakable grit. Southern California, 1857. A dusty road. A tense moment. A gang of angry, armed men steps in front of a travel-weary teenager. "You a Mormon?" they growl. Everyone else has run, but not him. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't lie. He meets their gaze and says with cool conviction,
"Yes, siree, dyed in the wool, true blue through and through."
So, who was this kid standing alone in the face of real danger? This wasn't just a brush with danger. It was the kind of moment that demands a decision about who you really are. The kind that reveals whether courage is something you talk about or something you carry with you. And how did he get to this moment? Let's rewind. Before long, this boy would grow into a leader, one who'd guide others through the storms of life, but first he had to face his own storms. His name was Joseph F. Smith. He was born in 1838 to Hiram and Mary Fielding Smith. When Joseph was 5 years old, his father was murdered alongside the prophet Joseph Smith, the founder of what is now the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, often known at the time as the Mormon Church. His father, Hiram, was shot with Joseph in the Carthage jail in Illinois. His mother, Mary, was a resilient pioneer woman who raised her children with fierce devotion. But by the time Joseph F. was 13, she too was gone. Illness took her, and just like that, he was orphaned. At 15, still grieving, still growing, Joseph F. Smith was called to serve a mission for his church. The assignment? Not a few towns over. Not even just a different state. No, he was sent thousands of miles away to the Sandwich Islands, what we now call Hawaii. Though I doubt he got a lay or surfboarding lessons on arrival. It was hot, humid, and completely foreign. He didn't speak the language. He was mocked for being so young. He struggled to learn, struggled with sickness, and often wrote home about his hardships. In one letter to his sister Martha Ann, his awkward spelling and grammar reveal not only limited formal education, but how unfamiliar he was with writing itself. It was the kind of spelling that makes teachers twitch, but something beautiful about it, because the kid, alone in a new world, was trying. My dear sister, it is with pleasure and with very peculiar feeling that I take my pen in hand to write a few lines to you. But the very act of writing, awkward spelling and all, was an act of courage. A boy trying to become a man. And in those tentative, scratchy lines of ink, one could see the resolve that would later keep him standing when others fled. He taught himself to read and write more fluently while serving. And despite his challenges, he continued. He didn't bail. He didn't hop a ship back home. He served faithfully for 4 years. Later, offering advice to that same sister, he wrote, "Prayer, with faith and hope on Jesus and His gospel, will alone do it." It wasn't just missionary advice. It was a reflection of his own hard-won conviction. Fast forward to 1857, or early 1858. Joseph F. Smith is about 19 years old and heading home through Southern California. The West is simmering with anger. Colonel Albert Sidney Johnston has been dispatched to Utah with an army to ensure peace and to keep the Mormons in check after they had been forced to flee en masse from Illinois 10 years prior. The semi-theocratic politics practiced by these Mormon pioneers is of concern to the politicians in the East. News of the Mountain Meadows massacre has spread. Mormons are under intense scrutiny, and violence is in the air. And while journeying with a small group, Joseph F. Smith and his companions encounter a group of armed men. Not just suspicious, hostile. According to Charles W. Nibley, who shared this account in the Improvement era shortly after Joseph F.'s death, the group of men stopped Joseph with clear intent to intimidate. Others in the group scattered. Because when angry men with guns ask questions, how can you be sure you're going to have the right answers? But Joseph stood his ground. Nibley recalls that Joseph later told him he wasn't going to run and resolved to meet them face to face. When asked if he was a Mormon, he met their eyes and said,
"Yes, siree, dyed in the wool, true blue through and through."
This unexpected courage disarmed the mob. It wasn't just bravery, it was character under fire. The kind that turns potential violence into stunned respect. And one of the men, taken aback by Joseph's honesty and composure, reportedly said, "Well, you're the pleasantest man I've ever met," and shook his hand and let him go on his way. It's worth noting Joseph F. Smith seems to have never recorded this story himself. What we know comes from those who heard him tell it firsthand. Men like Nibley, who preserved it because of the impression it left on them. Still, whether recorded or remembered, it's the kind of moment that doesn't need polishing. And let's be honest, no retelling of it is going to make it sound any tougher than it already does. It speaks for itself. Joseph F. Smith didn't become a legend because of that moment. But that moment told the world what kind of man he was. He went on to lead, to serve. Eventually, he became the 6th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He led during times of global war, pandemic, and internal division. But he never lost the grit he earned on a hot island beach or dusty California trails. This story is not about sainthood. It's a story about courage. About a lad who didn't flinch when life and the world gave him every reason to. It's about staying true when it would be easier to turn and run. So here's the ounce. Sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it shows up as calm and unshakable, and a young man who stands his ground. When your moment comes, when your ruffians appear, what will you say? If this story spoke to you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a little true blue in their day. Want more like this? Check out these other stories from An Ounce. Snapshots of grit, wisdom, and unexpected courage. Thanks.